One of the biggest factors in the current gold rally has been central bank demand. China's at the head of that. Well, a new feasible case is being made that everything we thought we knew has been grossly underestimated. The past 3 years in a row now, central banks have been buying more than 1,000 tons of gold a year. That's nearly a third of all the gold mined on Earth. More than double what they were buying just the decade before. Now, China, they've been the biggest buyer. You've probably heard that. This whole thing is a huge part of why the gold rally took off in 2024. Now, central bank buying actually took off back in 2022, but because so little of that is reported, the market just didn't realize what was happening until much later. Now, this is a well-known story by now. Central bank demand, global shift in reserve assets, de-dollarization. All of that points back to central bank gold tonnage. Not a new story. But what is new is we have new reports suggesting those numbers aren't even close. And the biggest buyer has only been reporting a fraction of what's really going on. And if this is true, the entire gold market has been priced off numbers that might be vastly underestimated. Now, before we take that further, quick shout out to Summit Metals. If you're looking for gold and silver, they have you covered. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, summitmetals.com. Okay, so look, I can't verify any of this that we're about to talk to. Leslie Hook and the Financial Times have done most of the legwork on this one. The theory that China is underreporting their gold purchases isn't new, but the evidence is. And what we're really diving into here is whether that underreporting changes things for the market price. And personally, I think it does. Not necessarily by pushing price even higher. This isn't a moonshot catalyst, but by supporting what has already been a historic rally. And a historic rally that some people out there still don't fully trust. And we're going to get into the evidence here. China has been reporting a few tons of gold a month, right? About 25 tons of gold for the year. But Societe Generale estimates that their true total for the year could actually be around 250 tons, 10 times more than the People's Bank of China is actually reporting. And SG isn't just making that up. Clues here include freshly cast 400-ounce bars with consecutive serial numbers. Now, that's something that likely wouldn't happen unless those bars are destined for a central bank or some kind of official buyer. Now, the process is pretty consistent. You refine them in Switzerland or South Africa, you ship them through London, and then they move on to China. Now, nobody can say exactly who those shipments belong to, but that kind of activity, the kind reserved for those official buyers, has spiked. Now, another clue shows up in UK export data. London is a major hub for large gold bars, the same type central banks prefer. We all know that. So when the UK suddenly starts shipping a surge of those bars to China, well, that's not retail and that's not coincidence. Now, imagine this 1 ounce coin is a 400-ounce bar and it's on its way to China. That's the data that SG used to build their estimate of 250 tons. And when you look at the export flows, they line up with the kind of buying that the People's Bank of China is known for. So again, not proof, but a very specific kind of footprint that usually points to these official buyers. Remember, this is a 400-ounce bar. It's not something going to the retail market. And speaking of official buyers, when you add up China's net imports plus its domestic mine production, subtract out what commercial banks and retail buyers take in, well, you're left with a number. And that number can only be explained by official buying. And in both 2022 and 2023, that number was more than 1,300 tons each year. So more than 6 times what China publicly reported, and Plenum Research calls that the gap. Now, this story gets even messier because China doesn't just have one official buyer. People's Bank of China is the only one that we can see. So the State Administration of Foreign Exchange buys gold. The China Investment Corporation, that's their sovereign wealth fund, buys gold. Even the military has its own balance sheet for gold. And it's reported that they've bought that gold for whatever purposes. I couldn't tell you what that'd be. None of those groups are required to report anything in a timely manner or even at all. So when you try to figure out how much gold China is actually accumulating, you're not just tracking one buyer, you're tracking their entire network, and that network has been designed to be hard to track. And this is where the numbers really start to get interesting, because some analysts aren't just saying China's underreporting lately, they're saying the real cumulative total might be twice what China admits. So not 2,304 tons, but 5,000. That's an estimate that comes from the director of the Japan Bullion Market Association. Now, the United States is still the world's largest reported gold holder with 8,134 tons in reserve, but 5,000 would put China in second place and a lot closer to the US than people think. And there's another clue in all of this. Global reporting has fallen off a cliff. 4 years ago, around 90% of central bank gold purchases were reported to the IMF. Today, it's closer to a third. Now, that's a huge drop in transparency right in the middle of the second largest gold rally on record. And it means that we're only seeing a fraction of what central banks are actually doing. So what's going on here with the lack of transparency? Well, part of this is political. Nobody wants to signal to Washington that they're buying a hedge against the dollar. Others, they just don't want to move the market against themselves by announcing these large purchases. That would spike the price even further as they continue to buy into it. And if you want an example of that, we can see the opposite happening when Gordon Brown announced the intent to sell down UK's gold reserves in 1999. They moved the price. They sent it down right as they were selling, and that turned out to be the bottom of the gold market. So transparency didn't really work for Gordon Brown. Now, on the political front, the world has been shifting away from the US dollar. We all know that. Ever since Russia's reserves were frozen in 2022, that's been happening. But there's no incentive to actually draw more attention to the fact that you're building that hedge against the currency that still runs the global system. That's really not about fear. That's just smart geopolitics. Maybe you're sidestepping an extra tariff. Who knows? Whatever the reason, though, there's no upside to publicly celebrate that move. Now, with China, this goes a step further. We know they're reducing their exposure to the dollar, but they play a different game than most do. They don't announce their moves at all, really. That allows them to say one thing while they do something else. So put all of this together, if China is buying more gold than anyone actually realizes, and they're doing it through multiple channels while reporting almost none of it, then the market isn't pricing in their real demand. And that matters because if the biggest buyer in the world is actually buying far more than the official numbers let on, well, that means the foundation of the rally is actually stronger than people think. So when I started digging into this story, I thought this was just going to be another puff piece giving one more reason for some kind of moonshot. But this one has teeth. I think what it tells us here is that the rally isn't floating on hype or speculation or short bouts of retail buying frenzy. It's actually being held up by a massive base of demand that most of the world can't even see. And that unseen demand is meaningful here. It has to come from somewhere. And eventually that kind of buying creates a wake that could pull the rally forward for a lot longer than people think. And let's call it good there. Let us know what you think in the comments. Is China stockpiling more gold than they're reporting, or am I just fanning some kind of theory here? Let us know. And then while you're in the comments, be sure to hit that like button if you found any of this interesting. Be sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on if you want to hear more on the topic. And if you're still here, thanks again for watching. I always appreciate your time. Take care.